Hi everybody. I'm working on a series where we take a look at all of the built-in methods available for JavaScript arrays. But I realized first we need to discuss what higher order functions are so that we can better understand how these built-in methods are used. So let's take a look at that now. What is a higher order function? What makes a function higher order is that it either takes another function as an argument or it returns another function. Functions in JavaScript are what are known as first-class functions, which just means that we can assign a function to a variable and use that variable in other places within our code. So as you can see here in our first example, we have a function that we've named my higher order function, and it takes an argument called a callback. A callback is just a word that we use that means a function that is passed as an argument into a higher order function. Within this higher order function, we do some stuff and then we execute the callback. Below this, we have another function that we've named my callback function. This function also does its own stuff. So now, if we execute my higher order function with the argument my callback function, you can see that it will do the work specific to the higher order function as well as what's defined in the callback. Hi, I'm a higher order function. What up? I'm a callback. Now that we know it's possible to pass a function into another function, let's look at an example of why we might want to do that. Here, I've prepared for us a couple of functions. One that filters out odd numbers from an array, and another filters out the even numbers. As you can see though, there is a lot of duplicate code between the two of them. They both accept an array as an argument. They both create a new array for the filtered items. They both loop through the original array, and they both return the filtered array. The only real difference is the logic we use to filter out the original array. So this is a situation where a higher order function would be beneficial. Here you can see that I wrote a higher order function called let's filter an array that takes an array and a callback function as arguments. Then, inside this array, it does the stuff that was common to our other two functions, and inside the for loop, it checks if the callback function returns true for that specific iteration, and it will either push that value into the new array if it's true, or it'll do nothing and move on to the next iteration if it returns false. Below that, I wrote a couple of functions that return a Boolean depending on specific conditions. One checks if x is odd, and the other if it's even. Now, let's execute this higher order function with our number array and each of these callbacks as arguments. These higher order functions are really powerful because now we can create use cases other than our original two and pass them into our let's filter an array function. You can see here I wrote another callback that returns a Boolean to check whether x is less than 8. We can also pass an array function right into the higher order function instead of assigning it to a variable first, like this, where I pass our array and then an arrow function that checks if x is greater than 10. But it gets even more powerful than that. You may know that JavaScript has some built-in methods that can be applied to any array. Well, we can also create our own functions and declare them to the array prototype. Then we can use them just like those built-in array methods. Check this out. We can declare our own built-in function on the array prototype that takes a callback as an argument. So for this example, I'm using basically the same function we created before with a few differences. You can see here that since we aren't putting an array in as an argument, we are instead acting on an array with this function. You might notice a word here in our function called this. If you haven't learned about the this keyword yet, basically in this example it's referring to the array that we are acting on. As you can see, that's just being used instead of the array argument that we were using before. and now we have our own custom built-in array method. So here we can pass the callback argument in as a variable or as an arrow function like we did earlier with our higher order function. Another cool thing you can do with these built-in array methods is function chaining. I'll give you a quick example here, but it's typically done by chaining different methods instead of the same one twice. When we run this code, you see two arrays here because I have the console.log inside each call. So first it's giving us even numbers. Then from that array, it's giving us the ones that are less than 8. If we were assigning this to a variable, which of course we can because functions in JavaScript are first-class functions, the variable would equal this second array. This is how we can use higher order functions to write cleaner, more maintainable JavaScript code. Now that we've seen how higher order functions can take callbacks as arguments, let's look at how they can also return functions. What we have here is a function with a switch in it and a few different cases. For those of you who haven't learned about switches yet, it's basically a chain of if-else blocks. If the operation is add, do this. Else, if the operation is subtract, do this, etc. And as you can see, each of these cases returns a function, so we are just telling this higher order function which function we want by the argument that we feed it. So we can assign this to a variable because we are first class that way, and when we console.log that variable, we see it is an anonymous function. Now we can give our new function a couple numbers and it will do its work as you can see here. We can alternately get really slick, and instead of assigning it to a variable, we can just invoke it immediately. Since as you saw, calling our higher order function returns an anonymous function, and then we can just immediately call it with the arguments we want like this. This is called an IFI, which means immediately invoked function expression, and it's just calling an anonymous function immediately after defining it. So there you have it. That's the basics of higher order functions. You've seen how they can either take another function as an argument or return a function, or they could even potentially do both. Now we are ready to begin the series on built-in JavaScript array methods. So if that sounds interesting to you, then please subscribe and make sure the notifications are enabled so you can be notified when they come out. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another subject that you'd like to see me talk about, then please leave a comment below. Thanks.